Sir, I can't find my mom. The vampire king stopped his carriage and ran into the snow-covered woods to find her. Snow descended in thick, crystalline sheets over the forest of Aramore, blanketing the ancient timber in deathly silence. Darius Blackthorn sat motionless within his obsidian carriage, red eyes half closed against the monotony of yet another midnight procession. The creak of iron wheels, the rhythmic thud of hooves on frozen earth, the shallow breathing of his guards riding alongside, all of it blurred into the tedious hum of immortal duty. He had ruled the Night Court for centuries, enforced treaties, extinguished rebellions, walked through rivers of blood without flinching. Tonight was supposed to be no different. Thank you for sticking around with me, my wonderful story family. If you're already hooked in for today's story and ready to enjoy it, click subscribe and let me know in the comments where you're watching from, because tomorrow I will be giving you another story just as interesting as this one. And you don't want to miss it. Now, let us begin. The world outside his window was a colorless wasteland of white and shadow, broken only by the skeletal silhouettes of pine trees clawing at the sky. No moonlight pierced the heavy clouds. No wind stirred the branches. Just the eerie stillness that preceded something unnatural. Inside the carriage, Darius wore black from collar to boot, a fitted coat trimmed in silver thread, leather gloves that had never known warmth, and a crown so heavy it felt like a curse. He looked every inch the monster mortals whispered about in their bedtime warnings. Cold, untouchable, eternal, he had come to the mortal border to finalize a blood treaty, another formality in an endless parade of obligations. After decades of boardroom negotiations between kingdoms, councils, and courts, he'd grown weary of politics. But duty was duty. He had dismissed sentiment long ago, buried it beneath frost and fog and the weight of a throne no one else could carry. Then it happened. A flash of red stumbled from between the trees. His horses shrieked, eyes blazing hellfire as their hooves skidded across ice. The carriage lurched violently. Darius was through the door before it fully stopped, coat billowing like spilled ink behind him as snow erupted around his boots. Standing in the center of the road, trembling and impossibly small, was a child. She couldn't have been more than 4 years old. Golden curls clung damp and tangled to her flushed cheeks. Her thin red dress peeked out beneath a threadbare wool sweater, far too delicate for the brutal cold. Her tiny hands reached toward him, fingers trembling. Tears froze on her lashes. Darius froze as well. His guards materialized behind him, hands on hilts, eyes scanning for ambush. Riven Hale's voice cut through the wind. "My lord, it could be a trap." But Darius barely heard him. The girl's lips quivered. Her breath came in shallow, frightened gasps. And then she spoke, voice breaking through sobs. "Sir, I can't find my mom." The word struck him like a blade he hadn't seen coming. Not the fear in her tone, not the cold that had clearly settled into her fragile bones, but that word, Mom. Something about it cracked through the ice he had built around himself over centuries. He lowered himself to one knee, snow crunching beneath him, so the child could see his face. His voice, cold as winter, yet unexpectedly soft, emerged. "What is your name, little one?" Her chin tucked into her collar as she blinked hard, fighting more tears. "Lily. Lily Marrow." Darius reached out slowly, carefully, and took her frozen hands into his gloved ones. Despite every instinct screaming that mortals were prey, that children were breakable, that kings did not kneel, he held her gently. "Come," he said quietly, lifting her small frame into his arms. She weighed nothing. "Let's get you warm first." He carried her to the carriage, his guards exchanging uneasy glances. Silas Crow stepped forward with a fur-lined cloak, and Darius wrapped it around Lily's shoulders. She shivered violently as warmth began to seep back into her limbs. Darius sat across from her, studying her face as color slowly returned to her cheeks. "Where is your mother, Lily?" Lily clutched the cloak tighter, voice barely a whisper. "We live near here in the woods." Mama said we'd be safe, but something growled. She told me to run. Her eyes welled again. She didn't follow. Darius felt something stir within his ancient chest, something dormant, dangerous. Worry, he leaned forward. How long ago? I don't know, Lily whimpered. It was still light. Darius looked out the window. It was deep into the night now, too long. Merrick Thorne appeared at the carriage door, snow dusting his dark hair. My lord, we should move. The Treaty Council is no longer my priority, Darius interrupted, his tone brooking no argument. He stepped out of the carriage, Lily bundled in his arms, and turned to his guards. Riven's bow was already in hand. Silas had begun tracing runes in the snow. Mark's expression was grim but loyal. Darius's voice cut through the falling snow like a blade. We enter the forest. Find her. The horses snorted as if sensing something monstrous ahead. But Darius didn't hesitate. He adjusted Lily against his chest, her small hands gripping his coat, and stepped into the dark tree-line. Behind him, his guards followed without question. The forest of Aramor swallowed them whole. The forest of Aramor swallowed them whole. Behind them, the horses stamped and snorted, eyes rolling, white despite their hellfire gaze. They sensed it, something older than instinct, darker than hunger. The creatures refused to go farther, pulling against their reins as if the forest itself had teeth. Darius adjusted Lily in his arms, her small body wrapped tightly in his cloak. The heavy fur dwarfed her, trailing past her feet like a shadow given weight. She pressed her face into his shoulder, breath warm against the cold leather of his coat. Predator and prey, monster and child. Yet here he was, carrying her deeper into danger instead of away from it. We go on foot, he said quietly. His guards moved without hesitation. Riven Hale took point, bow already strung, an arrow knocked loosely in his fingers. His pale eyes scanned the darkness between trees, tracking movement that wasn't there yet. Silas Crow knelt in the snow, fingers tracing glowing runes into the frozen ground, ancient symbols that pulsed faintly blue before sinking into the earth like roots. Tracking magic, old and reliable. Merrick Thorne drew his blade and carved a mark into the trunk of a nearby pine. Trail marker, he muttered, in case we need to find our way back. If they made it back. The snow deepened with every step, rising past their ankles, then their shins. It fell heavier here, as if the forest wanted to bury them. Darius moved through it effortlessly, boots crunching rhythmically, his supernatural strength making the terrain irrelevant. But his guards labored, breath clouding in sharp bursts, eyes alert. Lily stirred against him, voice barely a whisper. It was getting dark. Mama was gathering herbs. Darius glanced down at her. Tell me what happened, Lily. She swallowed, fingers clutching the edge of his cloak. We heard something, like a growl, but wrong. Not like a wolf. Deeper. Her voice trembled. Mama told me to run. She pushed me toward the road. She said, don't stop, don't look back. So I ran. And your mother? She stayed. Tears welled in Lily's eyes. She stayed and I left her. Darius felt the weight of those words. The guilt. The fear. He'd seen it before, mortals forced to choose between survival and sacrifice. It never got easier to witness. You did what she asked, he said gently. That took courage. Lily looked up at him, eyes searching his face as if trying to decide whether a monster could tell the truth. Silas rose from his crouch, runes fading into the snow. Faint trail heading northeast. Recent. Within the last few hours. Darius nodded and turned in that direction. As they moved deeper, a memory surfaced unbidden, hazy, distant, like something viewed through frosted glass. Helena. The name stirred recognition, though he couldn't place when or where. Centuries blurred together when you'd lived as many as he had. But there was something about the name Marrow. A healer, perhaps? During the war? He remembered a woman with steady hands and kind eyes, someone who'd tended his wounds when his own kind would have left him to burn. She'd asked no questions, expected no payment, just helped. Could it be the same woman? Darius frowned. If it was, then this was no coincidence. The forest shifted around them, slowly at first, then unmistakably. The wind died. The snow stopped falling midair, flakes suspended like frozen stars. No birds called from the branches. No animals rustled in the underbrush. Just silence, thick, unnatural, wrong. Riven stopped, hand raised. Something's not right. Agreed, Merrick muttered, marking another tree. Silas's eyes narrowed, scanning the darkness. It's watching us. Darius felt it too. A presence. Ancient and patient. Circling. Then Lily gasped. Look. Darius followed her gaze. Lying half-buried in the snow, glinting faintly in the dim light, was a pendant. Silver chain tangled around itself, the charm face down in the frost. Darius knelt carefully, setting Lily on her feet, but keeping one hand on her shoulder. He reached down and lifted the pendant, brushing snow from its surface. His breath caught. The symbol etched into the silver was unmistakable, a crescent moon intertwined with a thorned rose. The mark of the Healing Order, a group of mortal women who'd served during the Great War. Women who'd saved vampires and humans alike, refusing to choose sides. He'd seen this symbol before. On her. Helena, he whispered. Lily's eyes widened. That's Mama's. She never takes it off. Darius closed his fist around the pendant, chains biting into his palm. She was here. Close. And if she dropped this, it wasn't willingly. The forest groaned. A pulse of dark energy rippled through the trees, shaking snow loose from branches, rattling the pines like bones. The air grew colder, impossibly colder, as if something had sucked the warmth from the world. Riven's bow snapped up. Contact. Silas's hands blazed with runic light. Merrick stepped in front of Lily, blade gleaming. Darius rose slowly, a pendant still clutched in his hand, and scanned the darkness. Red eyes glowing faintly, he searched for the source. Nothing. Just shadows between shadows. Then, a scream. Distant, but unmistakable. A woman's voice, raw with terror and pain, echoing through the frozen woods. No. Stay back. Please. Lily's entire body went rigid. Mama. The scream cut off abruptly, swallowed by the suffocating silence. Darius's jaw tightened. His eyes blazed brighter, crimson cutting through the dark like blades. He handed the pendant to Silas, then lifted Lily back into his arms. Hold on to me, he commanded. And then he ran. Not the careful pace of before. Not the measured steps of a king. This was the speed of a predator unleashed, blurring through trees, snow exploding in his wake, his guards struggling to keep up. Somewhere ahead, Helena Marrow was still alive. But not for long. The world blurred into streaks of white and black as Darius tore through the forest. Trees whipped past. Snow sprayed in violent arcs. Lily clung to his neck with desperate strength, her small fingers locked into the fabric of his coat, as if he were the only solid thing left in a world gone mad. Behind them, his guards crashed through the underbrush, struggling to match his inhuman speed. Riven's breathing came hard and sharp. Marek's boots pounded against frozen ground. Silas muttered tracking spells under his breath, trying to keep the trail clear. Then the shadows moved. Not naturally. Not like darkness shifting with moonlight. These shadows twisted, peeling away from tree trunks and rising from the snow like smoke given shape. They formed vaguely human silhouettes, tall, wrong, too many limbs that stalked parallel to their path. Contact left. Riven shouted, losing an arrow. It passed through shadow and struck a tree with a hollow thunk. The shape dissolved, reforming 10 feet away. Illusions, Silas snarled, throwing a runic burst that scattered 3 more phantoms. They melted like ink in water, only to reappear ahead. Darius didn't slow. He could feel it now, the presence circling them, toying with them, testing their fear. The shadows weren't the threat. They were a distraction. He closed his eyes for a heartbeat, letting his vampiric senses take over. The world sharpened. Scents separated into distinct threads: pine sap, frozen earth, his guard's sweat, Lily's fear. And beneath it all, faint but unmistakable, blood. Human blood. Fresh. His eyes snapped open, glowing brighter. This way. He veered sharply left, following the scent through a dense thicket. Branches tore at his coat. Snow gave way to harder ground. And then he saw them. Claw marks gouged deep into a massive oak, bark stripped away in violent slashes. 4 parallel grooves, each as wide as his hand. Merrick stumbled to a stop beside him, breathing hard. Gods. Riven appeared on the other side, bow drawn, eyes scanning the canopy. What did that mean? Darius didn't answer. He moved forward, tracking the signs. More claw marks. Torn fabric, dark wool, caught on thorns. A piece of Helena's cloak, shredded and bloodied. The snow was disturbed here, dragged in chaotic patterns as if something had been pulled struggling through the drifts. She fought back, Silas observed quietly. She's still alive, Darius said, voice tight. The blood wasn't pooled. It was scattered. She was wounded but moving. Or being moved. Lily whimpered against his shoulder. What is it? What took her? Darius's jaw clenched. He'd hoped he was wrong. Hoped the presence he felt was something else, some lesser monster, some territorial beast. But the claw marks, the ancient magic saturating the air, the way the shadows moved. He knew. A night wraith, he said quietly. His guards went still. Impossible, Merrick breathed. They were destroyed. During the purge. Not all of them. Darius's voice was cold, edged with old anger. One survived. I should have hunted it down centuries ago. Silas's eyes widened. You know this creature? It was a vampire once. Kale Vane. Brilliant. Ambitious. Hungry for power beyond what our bloodline offered. Darius's grip tightened on Lily. He sought forbidden magic, death magic, shadow weaving, soul corruption. It transformed him into something neither living nor dead. A creature of pure hunger. What does it want? Riven asked. Darius looked at the claw marks, then at Lily's trembling form. Bloodlines. It feeds on lineage magic. The stronger the blood connection, the more power it gains. Lily's voice was barely a whisper. It wants me. Darius froze. What? She pulled back just enough to look at him, tears streaming. I heard it. When Mama told me to run. It said my name. It said I was special. Her voice broke. It wants me. The pieces fell into place. Helena's pendant, the healing order symbol. The warding spell on Lily that he'd sensed earlier. The wraith stalking them through mortal lands, far from its usual hunting grounds. This wasn't random. This was targeted. Silas, Darius commanded. What bloodline magic does the child carry? Silas moved closer, hands glowing as he traced symbols in the air around Lily. His expression shifted from concentration to shock. She's a convergence point. Human and something older. Fae, maybe? Or celestial. He looked at Darius. Her blood could amplify the wraith's power tenfold. Merrick swore under his breath. Darius's mind raced. Helena had hidden Lily's nature, warded her, kept her away from both vampire and wraith territories. But somehow, Kale had found her. A low growl echoed through the trees. Not from any direction, from everywhere at once. The temperature plummeted. Frost spread across bark in spiderweb patterns. The shadows stopped moving, frozen in place like statues. Even the snow seemed to hang suspended. Then, between two ancient pines ahead, eyes opened. Red eyes. But not his. These burned with malice and hunger, set in a face that was barely a face, smoke and bone, and something that had once been flesh. The night wraith stepped forward, form shifting between solid and vapor, impossibly tall, wrapped in tattered darkness. It smiled. And somewhere in the distance, Helena screamed again. The night wraith struck like a nightmare made flesh. One moment it stood between the pines, eyes burning with malevolent hunger. The next, it was upon them, a blur of bone and shadow that moved faster than mortal eyes could track. Darius barely had time to turn before claws raked across his shoulder, tearing through leather and flesh. He didn't flinch. Instead, he twisted, putting himself between the wraith and Lily, and unleashed the full force of his ancient power. His eyes blazed crimson. His fangs extended. Darkness rippled from his body like living smoke as he caught the creature's next strike with his bare hand. "Run!" he roared at his guards. They didn't run. They fought. Riven's arrow flew, wreathed in silver flame, striking the wraith's shoulder. The creature shrieked, a sound like metal tearing, and its form flickered between solid and vapor. The arrow passed through, but not before leaving a burning wound that smoked and hissed. Again, Darius shouted, but the wraith was already moving. It lunged at Riven, claws extended. Riven rolled, barely avoiding disembowelment, but the creature's talons grazed his ribs. He gasped, blood spreading across his side. Silas threw up a protective ward, runes blazing in a circle around them. The wraith slammed against it, and the ward shattered like glass. Silas stumbled backward, magical backlash throwing him into the snow. "Merrick, chains," Darius commanded. Merrick was already moving, pulling enchanted iron from his pack. He threw one end toward Riven, who caught it mid-roll, and together they encircled the creature. The chains glowed with binding runes, ancient magic meant to hold even the strongest monsters. The wraith howled, thrashing against the restraints. Where the chains touched its smoky form, flesh bubbled and burned. Darius seized the moment. He passed Lily to Silas, hold her, and launched himself at the wraith. His fist connected with what should have been a face, bone cracking under immortal strength. Then another strike. Another. Each blow landed with devastating force, driving the creature backward. But it was adapting. The wraith's form shifted, becoming less solid, more shadow. Darius's next punch passed through empty air. Claws emerged from the darkness, slashing across his chest. He felt his own blood spill, hot against the frozen air. "Fire," he snarled. Riven ignited an oil-soaked arrow and loosed it. The flame struck true, catching the wraith's chest. Fire spread across its shadowy form, and for a moment, just a moment, it screamed in genuine pain. Merrick yanked the chains tighter. Silas added his remaining power to the binding, and Darius drove his clawed hand into the creature's center mass, where a heart should have been. The wraith exploded backward, from dissipating like smoke caught in wind. It retreated into the trees, eyes still burning, a promise of violence yet to come. Then it was gone. Silence crashed over them like a wave. Darius stood panting, blood dripping from his wounds, eyes still blazing. His coat was shredded. His chest heaved with exertion he hadn't felt in centuries. Riven collapsed against a tree, hand pressed to his bleeding side. Silas knelt in the snow, drained. Merrick coiled the chains with shaking hands. Lily ran to Darius, tears streaming down her face, but she made no sound. Just clung to his leg, brave and silent, exactly as her mother must have taught her. Darius looked down at her, something twisting in his chest. "You're safe," he said quietly. But he wasn't sure that was true anymore. "It's stronger than before," Silas rasped, pushing himself upright. "Faster. More resistant to magic. It's feeding, Darius said grimly. On fear. On bloodshed. On proximity to its target. He glanced at Lily. We need shelter. Merrick pointed through the trees.
There.
Stone structure. Could be defensible. They moved quickly, Darius carrying Lily again, supporting Riven with his other arm. The structure emerged from the snow, an old chapel, half collapsed, stone walls crumbling but still standing. Holy symbols carved into the archway, worn but recognizable. The guards hesitated. Inside, Darius ordered.
Now.
They entered reluctantly. Vampires and holy ground didn't mix. Darius could feel it immediately, a low buzzing discomfort in his bones, like standing too close to sunlight. But it was better than being exposed. Silas tended to Riven's wound, applying herbs and binding runes. Merrick built a small fire using fallen beams. Darius set Lily down near the warmth, wrapping her more tightly in his cloak. Try to sleep, he told her gently. What about Mama? She whispered. We'll find her. I promise. Lily studied his face, searching for truth. Then, slowly, she curled up against the wall, clutching his cloak like a lifeline. Within minutes, exhaustion claimed her. Darius watched her sleep, memories stirring unbidden. Helena, the healer who'd saved him during the Great War when his own kind would have left him to burn. She'd asked no questions and expected no payment. It just helped. Why save us? She'd asked him once.
He hadn't had an answer then.
He did now. My lord, Silas called softly from across the chapel. Darius moved to where his guard knelt before the altar. Part of it had collapsed, revealing the hollow interior. Silas held up a lantern, illuminating carvings on the stone. Names.
Dozens of them.
Scratched into the surface as if by fingernails. And there, near the center, fresh enough that dust hadn't settled. Helena Marrow. Below it, a smear of blood, still dark, still recent. Darius's hand curled into a fist. She was here. Hours ago, maybe less, Silas confirmed. Which meant they were close. So close. But so was the wraith. And it wasn't finished hunting. Dawn came reluctantly to the forest of Aramore. Pale winter sunlight filtered through the canopy, weak and colorless, barely strong enough to cast shadows. It was the kind of light that didn't warm, only exposed. Darius felt it immediately, a heaviness in his limbs, a dulling of his senses. Not enough to incapacitate, but enough to slow him. Enough to make him mortal almost. Beside him, Riven leaned against the chapel wall, face drawn with exhaustion. Silas sat with his eyes closed, drawing what little strength he could from meditation. Merrick kept watch at the entrance, shoulders tense despite the daylight. Lily stirred from her makeshift bed of furs and Darius's cloak. She blinked slowly, rubbing her eyes, then looked around with the confused awareness of a child waking in an unfamiliar place. Mama, she whispered. Darius crossed to her, kneeling despite the protest in his weary muscles. Not yet, but soon. Her lower lip trembled. Then her stomach growled, loud in the quiet chapel. Darius blinked.
Right.
Children needed food. Regularly. Silas, he called. Do we have anything? Silas was already moving, pulling a small tin from his pack. Preserved broth. I can heat it. Within minutes, a small fire crackled in a cleared corner of the chapel, and Silas poured warm broth into a wooden cup. Darius took it, testing the temperature against his palm, then handed it to Lily. She accepted it with both hands, sipping carefully. Thank you. Darius nodded, watching her drink with an awkwardness he hadn't felt in centuries. Caring for mortals wasn't something vampire kings did. Yet here he was, ensuring a child was fed while weakened by daylight in a cursed forest. When Lily finished, she looked up at him with those wide, trusting eyes. We're going to find her today, aren't we? Yes, Darius said, surprised by how much he meant it. They left the chapel as the sun climbed higher, though its light remained pale and distant. Darius moved more slowly now, conserving strength. His wounds from the previous night's battle had healed, but not completely. Another sign of daylight's dampening effect. The forest changed as they traveled deeper. The trees grew twisted, bark blackened as if burned from within. The snow turned gray, contaminated by something beneath. Even the air tasted wrong, metallic and bitter. Cursed territory, Merrick muttered, hand on his blade. Darius nodded grimly. This was the Wraith's domain now. Ground so corrupted by dark magic that even nature recoiled. As they walked, Lily's hand found his small fingers wrapping around two of his. The gesture pulled at something in Darius's chest, a memory, distant but sharp. 200 years ago. Maybe more. Darius had been younger then, newly crowned, still learning what it meant to rule. He'd been hunting rogue vampires who'd broken the blood treaty, and they'd led him into a trap. Silver chains. Holy water. Wounds that wouldn't heal. He'd crawled to a cottage on the edge of mortal lands, ready to die or kill, whichever came first. Instead, a woman had opened the door. Helena Marrow. She'd looked at him, bleeding, fanged, monstrous, and hadn't screamed, hadn't run. She'd simply stepped aside and said, "Come in before you bleed out on my porch." She'd tended his wounds with steady hands, asking no questions, expecting nothing. When he was healed, she'd send him away with a warning. The world has enough monsters. Try not to be one of them. He'd never forgotten her face, or her kindness, and he'd never repaid the debt. Lily's voice pulled him back to the present. "Are you a monster?" Darius looked down at her. The question was innocent, curious, without accusation. He could have lied. Should have, perhaps. Instead, he answered softly, "Only to those who deserve one." Lily seemed to consider this. Then she squeezed his hand tighter. "I don't think you're a monster." Something cracked in Darius's chest. "My lord," Silas called from ahead. "You need to see this." They'd reached a clearing where the trees formed an unnatural circle. At the center stood a stone marker, ancient and weathered, covered in symbols that made Darius's eyes burn to look at directly. Silas knelt beside it, fingers tracing the carvings. "This is older than I thought. Pre-war magic. Blood rituals." He paused, face paling. "It's a genealogy marker." "What does that mean?" Riven asked. "It tracks bloodlines. Family trees." Silas looked at Lily, then at Darius. "According to this, Lily isn't just descended from the Healing Order. She's descended from Cale Vane's original bloodline, before he became the Wraith." Darius's blood ran cold. That's impossible. Cale had no family, no heirs.
He did.
A sister. She survived the purge, changed her name, went into hiding. Silas's finger followed the carved lines. Helena Marrow is a direct descendant, which makes Lily the last of his bloodline, Darius finished, voice hollow. Merrick swore. "That's why it wants her." "Not just wants," Silas corrected grimly.
Needs.
The curse Cale used to transform himself was incomplete. It requires a sacrifice, a willing heir of his own blood, to break the final seal, to make him fully immortal, unkillable. Lily's hand trembled in Darius's grip. "Mama knew? She was protecting you," Darius said quietly, "hiding you from both the Wraith and from anyone who might use you to destroy it." But now the Wraith had found her, and Helena had run out of places to hide. Riven suddenly froze, bow raised. Movement ahead. 300 paces. They advanced cautiously, weapons ready. The forest grew darker despite the daylight, shadows thick and unnatural. And then they saw it. A massive oak tree, ancient and gnarled, its trunk split open like a mouth. From within, roots writhed, blackened, pulsing with sick magic, forming a cocoon that hung suspended in the hollow. Inside the cocoon, barely visible through the gaps in the twisted roots, was a woman. Helena Marrow. Her eyes were closed. Her face was pale. Dark veins spread across her exposed skin like cracks in porcelain. She hung limp, barely breathing, but alive. Lily gasped. Mama. Darius caught her before she could run.
Wait.
It's a trap. Even as he said it, he felt it. The wraith's presence, circling, waiting. Helena was bait. And they'd walked right into the monster's web. Stay behind me, Darius commanded, his voice low and sharp. They approached the twisted oak slowly, every step measured, weapons drawn. The air around Helena's cocoon pulsed with dark energy, rhythmic, like a heartbeat, each pulse sending ripples through the corrupted roots. Riven's arrow tracked invisible threats. Marek's chains hung ready in his hands. Silas muttered protective incantations under his breath, though his voice wavered with exhaustion. Darius stopped 10 paces from the tree, studying the prison that held Helena. Up close, it was worse than he'd thought. The roots weren't just wrapped around her. They'd grown into her, black tendrils threading beneath her skin, feeding on her life force. She was being drained.
Slowly.
Deliberately. Helena, he called softly. No response. Her chest rose and fell, barely, but her eyes remained closed. Can we cut her free? Marek asked, blade already raised. Wait, Silas started. Too late. Marek's sword struck one of the roots. The entire cocoon erupted. Roots exploded outward like striking serpents, lashing with impossible speed. Marek barely rolled aside as thorns tore through the space where his head had been. More roots surged toward them, whipping, grasping, hungry. Riven fired 3 arrows in rapid succession, each one severing a root, but for every one cut, 2 more took its place. Silas threw up a barrier, but the roots crashed against it like waves, slowly cracking the magical shield. Fall back, Darius ordered, pulling Lily behind him as a root snapped past his face, close enough to draw blood. They retreated to the edge of the clearing, breathless and shaken. The roots settled back into place around Helena, watchful, waiting. It's alive, Silas panted. The entire structure. Cutting it only makes it angry. Darius's jaw tightened. There has to be a way. Silas approached the tree again, more carefully this time, reading the symbols carved into the bark. His fingers traced the ancient script, and his expression grew darker with each line. It's a blood seal, he finally said, specifically keyed to vampire magic. Only royal vampire blood can break it. The words hung heavy in the frozen air. Riven understood first.
No.
My lord, you're already weakened from daylight and the battle. If you... There's no other way, Darius interrupted. There's always another way, Marek argued. We could wait for nightfall. You'd be stronger then. She doesn't have that long. Darius could see it. The way Helena's breathing had grown shallower even in the few minutes they'd been watching. The roots are killing her. Silas stepped closer, voice quiet. My lord, I must warn you. Breaking a blood seal of this magnitude will cost you. The curse will transfer partially to whoever breaks it. You'll carry part of the Wraith's corruption. How much? I don't know.
Could be days.
Could be permanent. Darius looked at Helena's suspended form, then down at Lily, who stared up at him with tear-filled eyes. Please, Lily whispered. Please save my mommy. The words shattered something in him. He thought of Helena 2 centuries ago, opening her door to a bleeding monster. She hadn't hesitated, hadn't calculated the cost. She'd just helped. Try not to be one of them, she'd said. Darius knelt before Lily, meeting her eyes. I will. Before anyone could stop him, he drew the dagger from his belt and slashed it across his palm. Blood welled immediately, ancient, powerful, burning with centuries of magic. He strode to the cocoon. My lord, Silas reached for him. Darius pressed his bleeding palm against the roots. The reaction was instantaneous. His blood hit the cursed wood and sizzled, hissing like acid on flesh. The roots convulsed, shrieking in a voice that wasn't quite sound, and the seal began to crack. Light burst from the fissures, violent, blinding, as ancient magic tore itself apart. But the backlash was worse. Pain exploded through Darius's body. Not physical pain, something deeper. The curse recognized him, latched onto him, claimed him. He felt it surge up his arm in black tendrils, veins darkening beneath his skin, spreading like poison through his bloodstream. His vision blurred. His knees buckled. The force of the breaking seal threw him backward. He hit the ground hard, snow exploding around him, chest heaving as the curse burrowed deeper. Darius. Lily's scream sounded distant. Silas was there instantly, hands glowing as he traced stabilizing sigils over Darius's chest. Stay with me. Fight it. Darius's vision swam. The curse writhed inside him like a living thing, trying to consume, to corrupt. He could feel it searching for his heart, his core. Silas's sigils flared brighter. I said fight it. Darius snarled, fangs bared, and pushed back. His own ancient power rose to meet the curse, a battle waging inside his body. The darkness retreated, not gone, but contained.
For now.
His eyes snapped open, glowing crimson. Ahead, the cocoon was collapsing. Roots withered and fell away, releasing their prisoner. Merrick and Riven rushed forward, catching Helena as she fell. They lowered her gently to the ground, checking for signs of life. She's breathing, Riven confirmed. Weak, but alive. Helena's eyes fluttered open, unfocused and clouded with pain. She looked at the faces hovering over her, confused, until her gaze found Lily running toward her. Mama. Lily threw herself into her mother's arms, sobbing. Helena held her daughter weakly, tears streaming down her face. Lily, my brave girl. Then her eyes found Darius, still on the ground, black veins spiderwebbing across his skin. Recognition flickered across her face. Shock, then understanding, then something that might have been gratitude or grief. You, she whispered. Darius tried to stand. Silas helped him up, though he swayed dangerously. We need to move, Merrick said urgently. Now. As if summoned by his words, a screech tore through the forest, high, inhuman, filled with rage. The wraith had felt its prison break. Overhead, branches cracked. Ice began to splinter and fall like shattered glass. The ground trembled beneath their feet. Helena struggled to rise, clutching Lily. It's coming. Can you walk? Darius asked, voice rough. I'll crawl if I have to. Merrick swept Helena into his arms. Save your strength. The forest erupted around them. Trees groaned. Snow exploded upward in violent bursts. And somewhere close, too close, red eyes burned through the shadows. Run, Darius commanded. And the chase began again. They ran through a forest that had become a nightmare. Merrick led, Helena cradled in his arms, her head lolling against his shoulder. Riven took the rear, bow drawn, arrow nocked, scanning the twisted trees for movement. Lily clutched Darius's hand as he pulled her forward, his other hand pressed against his chest where the curse burned beneath his skin. Every step was harder than the last. The black veins had spread from Darius's palm up his arm, across his shoulder, creeping toward his heart. He could feel the corruption eating at his strength, dulling his senses. His vision flickered at the edges. Sometimes he saw the forest clearly, sometimes only shadows. Behind them, the wraith's screech echoed again. Closer now. Faster. Riven shouted.
But the force itself fought them.
The trees seemed to move, shifting position when no one was looking. Paths they'd been running down suddenly dead-ended in walls of thorns. Familiar landmarks appeared twice, 3 times, from different angles. We're going in circles, Merrick panted. It's warping space, Silas said, stumbling but staying upright. The Wraith's presence is corrupting reality itself. Then the whispers started. Soft at first, barely audible beneath the wind. Then louder, forming words that slithered into their minds like cold fingers. Turn back, leave the child, save yourselves. Why die for mortals? You cannot win. Riven shook his head violently. Don't listen. But the voices grew stronger, and with them came visions. Merrick saw his family burning in their home while he stood frozen. Riven watched himself firing arrows that struck his own companions. Silas faced a mirror where his reflection rotted from within. Darius saw Helena bleeding out on her cottage floor while he walked away, crown heavy on his head, choosing duty over debt. No, he growled, pushing through the illusion. Not real. Lily squeezed his hand tighter. They're lying, she said with surprising clarity. I can feel it. They're just scared words. Her voice cut through the fog in Darius's mind. He looked down at her and saw something he hadn't noticed before, a faint glow around her small frame, barely visible but growing stronger. The warding magic her mother had placed on her was awakening. Lily, he said urgently, can you sense the way out? She closed her eyes, standing still for a heartbeat while chaos swirled around them. Then she pointed. That way. Through the dark part. There's nothing but trees, Silas started. Lily opened her eyes, and they glowed faintly gold. Trust me. Darius didn't hesitate. Follow her. They plunged into the darkest part of the forest, where the trees grew so close together that daylight vanished entirely. It should have been impossible to pass through, but wherever Lily pointed, the trees seemed to part slightly, just enough. Her instinctual magic was guiding them. In Marek's arms, Helena stirred. Her eyes opened slowly, unfocused, struggling to make sense of where she was. She saw snow, trees, running figures. Then she saw Darius. Her breath caught. Even weakened, even cursed, she knew that face. Those red eyes. You, she whispered hoarsely. Merrick adjusted his grip. Save your strength, my lady.
No.
I know him. Helena's voice grew stronger, urgent. She looked at Darius as if seeing a ghost. Darius Blackthorn, the young king 200 years ago. Save your breath, Darius said roughly, not looking at her. We're not safe yet. Why? Helena's eyes welled. Why would you risk this? For me? For Lily? Because you once saved me when you had no reason to, he answered quietly. Consider the debt repaid. Before Helena could respond, the ground beneath them gave way. The ravine opened like a mouth, snow and earth crumbling. They fell, sliding, tumbling down a steep, icy slope. Darius grabbed Lily, tucking her against him as they crashed through frozen branches and over rocks. They hit bottom in a tangle of limbs and snow. Above, at the ravine's edge, the wraith appeared. Its form solidified more than before, taller, broader, face almost recognizable beneath the smoke and shadow. Kale Vane's face, twisted by centuries of corruption. It smiled down at them. Trapped, it hissed, voice like grinding bones. Finally. Move. Darius hauled himself up, pulling Lily with him. Riven fired upward. The arrow struck the wraith's chest and passed through, but the creature flinched. Silas threw a runic blast that forced it back a step. There. Merrick pointed to a dark opening in the ravine wall, a cavern, partially hidden by ice. They scrambled toward it as the wraith descended, moving like falling shadow. They made it inside just as claws scraped the cavern entrance. The space was narrow enough that the wraith couldn't follow easily. It would have to solidify fully, making itself vulnerable. For now, they had seconds to breathe. The cavern was small, frozen, lit only by the dim light from outside and Silas's glowing runes. Icicles hung from the ceiling like teeth. Their breath fogged in clouds. Darius set Lily down and leaned against the wall, black veins now visible on his neck. His breathing was labored. Helena sat up with Silas's help, looking at each of them. These strangers who'd risked everything for her and her daughter. "This has to end," she said quietly. "We know," Merrick replied grimly. "One way or another." Helena shook her head. "You don't understand. It's not just about fighting the Wraith." She looked at Lily, pain and love warring in her eyes. "There's something I never told her. Something I hoped she'd never need to know." Lily moved closer to her mother. "What is it, Mama?" Helena took her daughter's hands, tears spilling freely. "You're not just descended from Cale Vane's bloodline, sweetheart. You're the key. The curse that transformed him requires a sacrifice to complete, or to destroy. A willing heir must choose." "Choose what?" Darius asked, pushing off the wall despite his weakness. "To free him, completing the transformation, making him immortal and unstoppable." Helena's voice broke. "Or to destroy him, but it requires the heir to give up their own bloodline magic. Forever." Silence crashed over them. Lily stared at her mother. "You mean I have to choose?" Helena nodded, sobbing. "Either the Wraith becomes a god, or you lose the magic that protects you, that connects you to your ancestors, and you become just human. Vulnerable. Mortal in every way." Outside, the Wraith's claws scraped against ice. Lily looked at Darius, at his darkening veins and weakening frame. At Riven, wounded and exhausted. At Merrick, Silas, and her mother. All of them bleeding, broken, but still standing. "If I choose to destroy him," she asked quietly, "will it save everyone?" "Lily, no," Helena started. But the little girl's eyes held a determination beyond her years. "If I choose to destroy him," she asked quietly, "will it save everyone?" "Lily, no," Helena started. But the little girl's eyes held a determination beyond her years. "Will it?" They emerged from the cavern into a world transformed. The forest had given way to a clearing, circular, perfect, as if carved by ancient magic. The weak daylight had vanished entirely, replaced by an impossible twilight. Snow fell from a starless sky, black as ash, drifting down in slow spirals. It coated the ground in a layer of darkness broken only by the pale glow of a full moon that hung too large, too close. The Wraith waited at the clearing center.
It has fully solidified now.
Cale Vane's form was almost recognizable, tall, broad-shouldered, wearing the tattered remnants of noble clothing from centuries past. But his face was wrong. Eyes burned crimson, skin stretched too tight over bone, mouth splitting wider than human anatomy allowed. Shadows leaked from him like blood from a wound. "Welcome," he rasped, "to the end." Darius stepped forward, black veins crawling up his neck toward his jaw. Every movement sent fire through his body, but he forced himself upright. "This ends tonight, Cale." "Yes," the Wraith agreed. "But not how you imagine." Behind Darius, his guards spread out in formation, practiced, instinctive. Riven to the left, bow drawn despite his wounded side. Merrick to the right, chains glowing with fresh enchantments. Silas behind, hands already weaving complex runes in the air. Helena held Lily close, but the child pulled free, walking toward the center of the clearing. "Lily." Helena reached for her. "It's okay, Mama." Lily's voice was steady. "This is what I'm supposed to do." She stopped halfway between Darius and the Wraith, tiny in her red dress against the falling black snow. She trembled, of course she trembled, but she didn't run. The Wraith's expression shifted, something almost gentle crossing his monstrous features.
"Child."
"My blood. My last remaining heir." He knelt, bringing himself closer to her level. "You feel it, don't you? The connection. The power waiting inside you." Lily nodded slowly. "I can give you more," Cale continued, voice honeyed with false kindness. "Power beyond imagination. A family of immortals who will never leave you, never die. You'll never be alone again. Never be afraid. He extended a clawed hand. Take my hand, child. Choose me. Complete the curse, and we will be gods. For a moment, a terrible, breathless moment, Lily stared at his offered hand. Then she looked back at her mother. At Darius, black veins are spreading, barely standing but still there. At the guards who'd bled for her, strangers who'd become protectors. No, she said quietly. The wraith's expression darkened. No. You're alone, Lily said, tears streaming. You've been alone for so long you forgot what family really means. It's not power. It's not living forever. She shook her head. It's choosing to stay when things are hard. It's being brave for each other. Foolish child. I choose them. Lily's voice rang clear across the clearing. I choose my mama. I choose the people who came to save us. I choose love. The wraith roared, from exploding outward into shadow and rage. Then you choose death. He lunged. Darius was faster. He intercepted the wraith mid-strike, catching claws meant for Lily's throat. The impact drove him backward, boots skidding through black snow, but he held firm. Now, he roared. Riven fired 3 arrows in rapid succession, silver-tipped, blessed with holy water, striking the wraith's back. The creature shrieked, from flickering. Marek's chains flew, wrapping around the wraith's limbs. Where they touched, flesh burned and smoked. Silas's hands blazed with runic light. He slammed them into the ground, and a circle of binding symbols erupted around the wraith, glowing brilliant blue. Hold him. The wraith thrashed, more powerful than before, fueled by rage and desperate hunger. One chain snapped, then another. Riven fired again, an arrow piercing the creature's shoulder, solid, real damage. But it wasn't enough. The wraith broke free, backhanding Marek across the clearing. He crashed into a tree with a sickening crunch. Riven dove aside as claws tore through the space where he'd stood. Silas's barrier shattered, magical backlash throwing him to his knees. Darius charged again, fangs bared, ancient power rising despite the curse eating him from within. He tackled the wraith, and they went down together, a blur of fang and claw and shadow. Blood, red and black, sprayed across white snow. Lily. Helena's voice cut through the chaos. She pressed her pendant into her daughter's hand. Remember what I taught you. The words. Lily clutched the pendant, silver burning bright against her palm. She ran forward, toward the thrashing figures, and began to chant, words in a language older than memory, taught by her mother, passed down through generations. The pendant blazed like a star. Darius heard her voice and understood. He grabbed the wraith's arm, holding it despite claws tearing into his flesh. With his other hand, he reopened the wound on his palm, royal vampire blood, still potent, still powerful. Now, Lily. She pressed the pendant against the wraith's chest, right where a heart should be. Darius's blood touched it at the same moment, mixing with her magic, with Helena's protection, with the courage of a child choosing sacrifice over power. The reaction was cataclysmic. Light exploded outward, blinding, pure, burning away shadow. The wraith screamed, a sound that shattered ice and cracked stone. The curse tore itself apart, ripping free from the wraith's form, seeking escape. It found Darius. The full force of the corruption surged into him. Centuries of dark magic, forbidden power, corrupted souls. It hit him like a tidal wave, and he felt himself drowning in it. His vision went black. His heart stopped. He was dying. But then warmth. Lily's small hand on his chest. The pendant pressed between them. Her voice, still chanting, glowing with innocent, unbreakable light. The curse couldn't hold against it. It burned away like morning fog, pulling out of Darius's body in black tendrils that dissolved into nothing. The veins faded. His heart restarted with a painful lurch. he gasped, falling to his knees. Before them, the wraith collapsed, forming finally solidifying into the man he'd once been. Cale Vane lay in the snow, looking almost peaceful, almost human. His eyes, no longer red, just gray and tired, found Lily's. "Thank you," he whispered. Then he dissolved into ash, carried away by the wind. The black snow stopped falling. Regular snow, white, clean, soft, began to drift down instead. The unnatural moon faded, replaced by the normal night sky. Silence. Then Lily threw herself at Darius, sobbing. "Don't leave us. Please don't leave us." Darius caught her, holding tight despite his exhaustion. "I'm here," he said hoarsely. "I'm not going anywhere." Helena ran to them, dropping to her knees, pulling both of them into her arms. Behind them, the guards slowly rose, battered, bleeding, but alive. The wraith was gone, and somehow, impossibly, they had survived. Dawn came slowly to the forest of Aramore. The clearing where they'd fought the wraith was quiet now, transformed from battlefield to something almost peaceful. Normal snow fell softly, covering the scars of combat, the torn earth, the scattered ash that had once been Cale Vane, the blood soaked into frozen ground. Darius tried to stand and nearly collapsed. Helena caught him, her arms slipping around his waist, supporting his weight despite her own exhaustion. She was stronger than she looked, steadier than she should have been after days of captivity. The healer in her hadn't died, even after everything. "Easy," she said softly. "You've given too much." "I've survived worse," Darius replied, but his voice lacked conviction. Across the clearing, Riven leaned heavily on his bow, pressing his free hand against his wounded side. Merrick sat in the snow, checking the deep bruises where he'd hit the tree. Silas knelt nearby, wrapping Marek's ribs with practiced efficiency despite his own trembling hands. They were alive. Broken, bleeding, but alive. Lily stood between Darius and her mother, looking small and impossibly brave in her red dress. The pendant still hung around her neck, returned to Helena, then given to Lily. A symbol of heritage, of sacrifice, of the choice that had saved them all. "We should move," Merrick said, wincing as Silas tightened the bandage. "Before something else finds us." "Agreed," Riven muttered. "I've had enough of cursed forests for several lifetimes." The journey back to the carriage felt longer than Darius remembered. Every step was an effort. The curse was gone, burned away by Lily's magic, but the cost remained. He'd given so much, blood, strength, pieces of himself he hadn't known he could spare. Helena stayed at his side, and he found himself grateful for her presence. After 2 centuries, the woman who'd once saved him was doing it again, in a different way. The horses were still waiting, somehow. They stamped nervously when the group emerged from the treeline, but they hadn't fled. The obsidian carriage stood exactly where they'd left it, frosted with fresh snow, looking like something from a dark fairy tale. Darius leaned against it, breathing hard. The sun was rising now, pale winter light spreading across the horizon, turning the world's soft shades of pink and gold. Beautiful, painful to his vampire eyes, but beautiful nonetheless. He felt Lily's small hand slip into his. "You kept your promise," she said, looking up at him with those wide, trusting eyes. "You found Mama." "We found her together," Darius corrected gently. Lily smiled, the first real smile he'd seen from her. It transformed her face, made her look less like a child who'd faced monsters and more like just a child. Helena approached slowly, standing before Darius with tears streaming down her face. For a long moment, she just looked at him, taking in the man he'd become, the king who'd knelt in the snow for her daughter, who'd sacrificed everything to keep a debt 2 centuries old. "I don't know how to thank you," she said, voice breaking. "You didn't have to, you shouldn't have." She pressed a hand to her mouth, overwhelmed. "You saved me once," Darius said quietly, "when you had no reason to." when it would have been easier to let me die. He met her eyes. The debt is paid. Is that all this was? Helena asked softly. Repaying a debt? Darius opened his mouth to answer, then closed it.
Was it?
It had started that way, perhaps. But somewhere between finding Lily in the snow and holding her while she sobbed over her missing mother, something had changed. He looked at Lily, still holding his hand with absolute trust. Then at Helena, watching him with an expression he couldn't quite name. Then at his guards, battered, loyal, having followed him into death without question because they believed in him. No, he finally admitted. It wasn't just a debt. Helena's breath hitched. Then what was it? Darius struggled for words. He'd been a king for centuries. He'd commanded armies, negotiated treaties, and ruled with absolute authority. But this vulnerability, this admission, was harder than any battle. It was a choice, he said quietly.
To be more than what I've been.
To be. He trailed off, uncertain. To be good, Lily finished for him, squeezing his hand. Something cracked in Darius's chest. Before he could respond, Lily threw her arms around his waist, hugging him with all the fierce, unrestrained affection only a child could give. Her small body pressed against him, warm and alive and trusting in a way that terrified and humbled him in equal measure. Thank you for saving us, she whispered into his coat. Thank you for being brave. Darius's hand came up slowly, hesitantly, and rested on her golden curls. You are the brave one, he said, voice rough with emotion he'd thought long buried. Helena stepped closer, placing her hand on his shoulder. Where will you go now? It was a simple question, an obvious one. The battle was over. His duty was fulfilled. He should return to the night court, to his throne, to the cold halls and colder obligations that waited. He should walk away, but he found he didn't want to. I could. Darius paused, vulnerability bleeding into his voice. I could escort you home. Make sure you arrive safely. He hesitated. If you would permit it. Helena smiled through her tears. I think we'd like that very much. Lily pulled back, beaming up at him. Will you stay? After we get home? Will you visit? Darius knelt, bringing himself eye level with her. For the first time in centuries, he allowed himself to imagine it, a cottage at the edge of mortal lands, a door that opened without fear, a table with 3 seats instead of a throne for one. Yes, he said. I think I will. Lily's smile could have lit the darkest night. Darius straightened and lifted her effortlessly, settling her on his hip as if he'd done it 1,000 times. She rested her head against his shoulder, tired and content. Helena stepped closer, and together they walked to the carriage. Riven opened the door, managing a small smile despite his pain. My lord. Just Darius, he replied quietly. For today, just Darius. He helped Lily into the carriage first, then offered his hand to Helena. She took it, fingers warm against his cold skin, and stepped up beside her daughter. Darius climbed in after them, settling across from them as his guards mounted the horses. The carriage began to move, wheels crunching through fresh snow, leaving the cursed forest behind. Inside, Lily had already fallen asleep against her mother's side. Helena watched Darius across the small space, and something passed between them. Understanding, gratitude, possibility. You're not what I expected, she said softly. A vampire king who chooses mercy. And you're not what I remembered, Darius replied. Though perhaps you never changed. Perhaps I simply saw you differently. Perhaps we both changed, Helena offered. The carriage rolled on through the dawn. The snow had stopped entirely now, and sunlight, weak but warm, filtered through the windows. It hurt, as it always did, but Darius didn't close the curtains. He let the light touch his face, let the warmth of the small family across from him seep into bones that had been cold for too long. They rode not as king and mortals, not as predator and prey, not even as savior and saved. They rode as something more fragile and more powerful than any of those things. They rode as family. And in a world of fangs and frost, it was a child's trembling hand that thawed an immortal heart.